Now, I have to tell you, before we get into the meat of today's lesson, that I'm a word person. I don't remember when I started to read, but I do remember Miss Fett in the first grade, who told me that if I really wanted to be a bluebird as opposed to a robin, I had to read with expression. Now, those of you who remember the Scott Forsman text know that words on a page may have been two, like, look, Spot. Oh, Tim. Well, you don't have to tell a long, lean Black girl how to be successful. I began to deal with Tim and Spot and the picture and the author's intent. So, look, Spot. Oh, Tim. I'm a literacy junkie. And that's what you have before you today. My only talent or asset is that I read. Well, maybe there's another little one. I think about what I read. And I want to read something to you now to begin this sermon that may give you a little pause. It's from Data Point, and you can find this on your computer. What is the makeup of adults with low English literacy skills by nativity, status, and race ethnicity? US-born adults. Oh, by the way, I forgot my glasses. Will you excuse me for just a minute? Old people leave things in places. You know the phone, all right, that I swear we need a skin flap for. It's coming. US-born adults make up 2/3 of the adults with low levels in English literacy skills in the United States. However, the non-US born are overrepresented among such low-skilled adults. Non-US born adults comprise 34% of the population with low literacy skills, compared to 15% of the total population. White and Hispanic adults make up the largest percentage of US adults with low levels of English literacy skills. 35% and 34% respectively. Think about it. I know that one cannot work in a society as complex as ours and not read, not comprehend. All the pictures in the world will not, and somehow I'm getting some feedback from this mic, all the pictures in the world will not suffice. Thank you, Joe. Will not teach the skills that one needs to comprehend what one reads. At some point, we must not only teach reading, but we must teach thinking skills. I have a poem in front of me that you'll hear at some point as the lyrics to a song. It's called Everything Must Change. I have questions. It is rare that we have young people who seek an answer other than by way of, where's my phone? Oh, here it is. You too have learned that if you place it on something dark, you won't be able to see it. But we too, as older citizens of the realm, have become accustomed to having our queries answered by Dr. Google. Now, I didn't come to lecture. I came to, in case you wanted to engage in a discussion, to have you look at what I and a few others are seeing. Do you remember when you first became acquainted with the demon here? Maybe 5, 6 years ago. You noted that as you developed text of any kind, words would be suggested to you at the bottom of the screen. Now, if you can accept the fact that the card that once represented you with ones and zeros on it to tell who you were or could be, has now been folded 3 or 4 times. And the ones and zeros have gone into other languages. I mean, Fortran, whatever, depending upon usage. You will understand both my chagrin and perhaps yours, and your perplexity. What will our society do as it becomes increasingly illiterate? Now, I came to read a few poems and to make you feel good about words today. And I guess I have questions, no answers, and just a few speculations, we'll call them. However, I have come to a conclusion, supported by a few other elderly wise folk, like Newton Manaw, who I think it was in about 1960, he speculated upon this being, that television would be a grave wasteland. There's a young person out there, and she writes for the Atlantic Monthly. And she suggests to us, what did she call it? I have the magazine here because I'm old enough to have memory lapses, but I have no shame. It's in the Atlantic Monthly. And she posed these questions on, or at least this suggestion. We're already living in the metaverse. Reality is blurred. Boredom is intolerable. and everything is entertainment. Our children are addicted to entertainment. TikTok is I call it a conspiracy. It's the reading of the American mind. Do you hear me? The reading of the American mind. Read the article. Her name is Megan Garber, March 23 in the Atlantic Monthly. You can find it on Dr. Google, I'm sure. For those of us who take what is written seriously and think about it. However, I had come to a conclusion, supported by a few other wise folk, that modern democratic cultures or societies are sustained by literate populations. But then I examined our own democracy and its reluctance to invest in public education, while some of us conversely promote procreation that we are ultimately unwilling to, as they say in corporate America, we're unwilling to monetize it. We want folk to be educated, but we don't want to pay the price. And there is a price for people who think. I'm going to lay that out further to you, because your previous generations and mine thought about not only today, but tomorrow. And I'm going to suggest some research for you to do. Should the monetary obstacles disappear all of a sudden, the blind would then seek dominion over curricula so that their religious, social, or political fealties would not be violated. It's happening now. Are literacy and reason to be held hostage by our vague and ill-defined national culture? That's a question I pose to you. You realize, well, first of all, I'll ask how many of you will raise your hand if you came from a small town, particularly in Pennsylvania or New Jersey or New York? Okay. I'm from Erie, PA. I was born there. Anybody here from Erie? You lived there. Oh, well, then you know what I mean. Or you may be too young to know what I mean. My mother was one Black child in most of her schooling. She didn't start school until she was 9 years old in Erie, Pennsylvania, because of family dynamics. But not only did she go to Wayne Elementary School in East Erie, all right, not on the other side of Erie. She went to East High School and got such a good education that 25, 30 years later, I passed ninth grade science using her notes, which were immaculate. Do you understand what I'm saying? And I also was one Black child in a sea of white children most of the time. My dearest friend, and we're both of a certain age since we came through elementary school, and I did not feel the sting of prejudice in our community because everybody worked. Black folk worked and white folk worked. We didn't have grand jobs, but in that time, factories were open in Erie. They no longer are. Some of you may have in your possession a Griswold Manufacturing frying pan. Look on the bottom of it. It's worth a fortune, people. Strayer Bucket was there. Interlake Iron was there. Names you see or used to see on heavy equipment came out of Erie, Bucyrus, Erie, and a few other places. As industry moved, so did literacy throughout the country. I would dare say at this time, those of you who happen to be beyond the age of 40 and to have gone beyond the 12th grade in high school have a far better education than your grandchildren. Think about it. Think about it. And I want to pose, and I probably need to put my timer up because I can go on. I used to teach English for 3 hours, all right? I'm dismayed. I want to read to you at some juncture poems by my latest favorite author, who has written or has available now 2 books, How the Word is Passed, which you can find on Audible or by way of whatever you're using for content. I have it in both so that I can hear it and I can hear his voice. His voice is very comforting. And a book of poems that I find absolutely charming and quite different from the Paul Laurence Dunbar and who else Black did you read when you were in high school? Langston Hughes. That's as far as you got. I introduce you today to Pauli Murray. Look her up. I'm going to introduce you to a lot of things, a lot of ideas perhaps, as we go along in this sermon. I want to introduce you to Megan Garber. And that's the person that you just saw on the cover. Now, you know old people can't find anything. But I have found that during this, and I saw the sign as I came in, Black lives do matter, but all lives matter. I want you to know that. That is my position. All lives matter. Why else then are we concerned about the planet? We do not talk about the peoples on the planet who can't afford to have a concern about the planet because they are concerned about their next meal. They can't see what you may be aware of happening. They did not smell the smoke from Canada in the last 2 weeks. And by the way, I go back to Erie and tell you that I am clearer about my heritage than you are about yours. And that's after how many years of studying the heritage of the West. I know, for instance, that your great-great-grandparents all did not come over on ships like the Mayflower or even the Ile-de-France. Now that was supposed to be funny, people. I know, having lived in Erie, Pennsylvania, that there were languages spoken on the radio back there, back when I was a child. On Sunday morning, the Mass was still done in Latin, by the way, and my mother listened to it, though she went to the Baptist church down the street. And after the Mass, we listened to Frankie Yankovic and the polka. All right. And after that, we listened to the station from Buffalo that gave us the Golden Gate Quartet from California. And after that, we listened to CJBC in Canada, where I learned of Scott Joplin. I didn't learn about him. I've got a 5-minute call, people, and I'm going to wind up. I'm about to tell you that I probably know more about my heritage than you do about yours. What impelled your parents to come here? I read also an author, Annie Proulx, and you may remember that she wrote Brokeback Mountain, but she wrote a couple of other books that talk about settlers coming to this country. And mostly because they could gain financially, and mostly because of their European ties at the time. But I want you, I charge you to go back and look at the places from which you stem, at the feudal, brutal societies, many of them, from which you came. I was a grown woman before I knew that early Scotsmen, for instance, were held in thrall, much as slavery, so that they could work in the mines. Little Dr. Law who lived in the Polish neighborhood. Well, I was born in a Polish neighborhood in Erie, Pennsylvania. St. Anne's Church over on East Avenue. All right. Near Half's Bakery. Listen to the names. I want you to know from where you have sprung, the real you, as you go about learning why we do the things we do and questioning them. By the way, I'm going to end with the words to a poem, if I can find it. This one, Joe doesn't know about. It's called Paul Robeson. I may have told him about it. That time we all heard it, cool and clear. And I know those of you of a certain vintage heard the voice of Paul Robeson. Cutting across the hot grit of the day, the major voice, the adult voice, foregoing rolling river, foregoing tearful tale of bale and barge, and other symptoms of an old despond. Warning in music words, devout and large, that we are each other's harvest. We are each other's business. We are each other's magnitude and bond. Words, words, words by Gwendolyn Brooks.